this December 7th through 9th. Check out the EdUp Experience podcast live and in person in Doha, Qatar for the World Innovation Summit on Education. We will be documenting the ideas and innovations from today's most influential global education leaders. Check them out at wise-qatar.org and follow the EdUp Experience podcast for more information. Yay! Unmuddle. Have you heard of them yet? If you haven't, you got to check them out at unmuddle.com/colleges. They are disrupting the community college scene. Their course to jobs marketplace is a modern way for community colleges to compete with the big players. Check them out again at unmuddle.com/colleges. That's UNMUDL.com/colleges. Welcome back, everybody. This is the EdUp Experience podcast where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you again on another amazing episode. And in this particular episode, I believe we have an amazing triangle of folks. I've got an amazing co-host, amazing guest. This is a co-host that by the time this episode airs, you have heard several times by now, and you may begin to recognize her entrance music. I'm going to play it for you now. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson. It's more of an entrance sound than music.
It is. Hi, Joe. Hi, everybody. Glad to be back.
Of course, you are the Director of Teaching and Learning Initiatives and Special Projects at San Jacinto College. Michelle, thank you for coming back yet again on the EdUp Experience podcast.
I am honored to be invited. You know how crazy I am about this show. I listen to it every day. I'm determined to listen to all, what are you at 360 episodes now?
Oh, not that many. 316, 320, somewhere around there.
Okay, I'm going to listen to every single one. That's my goal.
If you do that, we're going to have to do something special for you. I may even decide to change your entrance sound from an air horn. That would be your reward because it's so good. I feel like every time you're going to get ready to talk, Michelle, see, it's too good.
Our guest is going to find you so charming. I can't wait.
Oh my gosh. She's rolling her eyes literally as we speak. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Ncaa Blair Hackworth, and she's Director of Inclusion at the Ncaa. Ncaa, how are you?
I'm great. I'm just wondering what my sound is going to be. So I'm excited to be here. I'm doing well. I will say that I am not Dr. Ncaa Blair Hackworth yet. Oh. I am still completing my, I'm actually in the midst of writing my dissertation. So
I don't care what anybody else says. You're Dr. Ncaa Hackworth today on this episode. It feels good when you get it, I promise. I want to be honest with you, Ncaa. I spent a lot of time before this episode trying to decide what your entrance sound was going to be. I chose this because I felt like the crowd needed to stand up for you and recognize your great work. Michelle chose this. I felt like it was a little underwhelming.
He's a wonderful person, but he's a perpetual liar. He's good at what he does, so we forgive him.
I was like, come on, Michelle. It's something a little stronger than that for Ncaa. Okay. Ncaa, tell us a little bit about you. You've got a great background. Give us the quick journey to the Ncaa's Director of Inclusion.
Thanks. My quick journey is that I spent 12 years working at higher education institutions in various areas of diversity, inclusion, supporting non-traditional students, also leadership programs and minority male programs. Always had a passion for diversity, equity, inclusion work since actually my undergrad and graduate school. I also so that was what led me to the Ncaa. Still wanted to be able to do meaningful work in the ED&I space, but wanted to explore what other opportunities that I could do this work, still be connected to higher education. And when the opportunity came at the national office, it's like, wow, this is great. Being able to support student athletes, and I work with student athletes at various institutions that I worked at. And also being able to still do diversity, equity, inclusion work in a larger platform, being able to touch over 500,000 student athletes that we have at the Ncaa. I thought it was a great opportunity, and I'm very glad to be here. So that's the real quick version of it all.
I love it. So what does this look like for you? Director of Inclusion at the NCAA. You know, some would think, oh, it's the NCAA. You must have amazing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Who needs to put more of an investment at the NCAA? I mean, you got so many resources there, but it's not the case, right? It's something that has to be continually discussed and trained, and students need to be mentored and included. What's work look like for you as the Director of Inclusion? What does that entail? And tell me, I mean, don't give me the day in the life of Ncaa, but talk about maybe some projects or initiatives that you've been a part of, spearheaded, brought to the table at the NCAA.
Yes. So I'm a part of the Office of Inclusion team. And so we say we're a small but mighty team. And so my focus areas within the national office are race, ethnicity, and disability. And we have 3 other core areas, which are gender, LGBTQ, and international. And so some of the major projects that I've helped work and lead on, one, we all know last year in terms of the tragic murder of George Floyd, and as though as a world, as a society, really put a lot more emphasis on race and ethnicity. And so I have provided numerous, more than I can count, workshops and educational experiences to what we call our membership, the NCAA membership. So to student athletes, coaches, and administrators on what does it mean to foster an anti-racism athletic community? What does it mean to foster or create cultures of belonging? Also created resources that tie into different types of presentations on conversations of race and strategies to advance racial justice. Also, we have some efforts internally at the national office as well as externally that's a part of our 8-point plan to advance racial equity. And so I have been helping lead in some of those areas, be it from programs offered to we have an unconscious bias training that's going to take place soon for our national office staff. So helping with that, to helping with our inclusive language document, working with colleagues who are looking at that. So being a part of the 8-point plan, some of the programs and initiatives for race and ethnicity. From the disability side, we formed a disability advisory group. And so we have a guide that we hope to have out to our membership early 22. And so working with the advisory group and the focus group and different consultants on that, as well as some projects of really talking about how do we help amplify student athlete voice and support student athlete voice, so activism. So those are some of the major projects. And another aspect of my job that's very continuous is that I am the primary liaison to one of our committees, our association-wide committees, which is MOIC, the Minority Opportunities and Interest Committee. And so that committee meets a few times a year and really helps move forward different things that are important for the membership to help advance opportunities for minorities within the NCAA. So that's a few things.
That's what I'm going to give you the whole rest of the episode because it feels like that's probably just a small part of what you do. And you look beneath any one of those things and there's 40 components to it, yeah. Right? So one of the things that, and I'm going to pass it to Michelle here in just a second, but I want to just focus on the student athlete voice, social justice issues becoming more of a central focus, I think, for all of us, but certainly for student athletes that are coming up since the George Floyd murder in particular. But what does that look like? I mean, do students feel like they have a voice in general? How do students amplify their voice if they want to get involved? And does the NCAA, there's a lot of questions in there, but does the NCAA foster opportunities from your office to say, hey, look, if you want to use this voice, here's how you do it. Let us facilitate you using your voice rather than you try to figure it out on your own.
So I'm going to try to remember all those questions.
It's impossible. There's no way to remember all of those. Just take the last one. How do students get involved if they want to amplify their voice?
Well, I'll first start as by saying, since last summer, we saw student athlete voice really increase with their efforts, not only supporting Black Lives Matter, but also just social justice in general, be it with patches. So our SAC, our Student Athlete Advisory Committee, our national SAC had patches that teams could wear on jerseys. They were more vocal. They participated in higher numbers for our diversity inclusion social media campaign. So, I think if you Google student athlete voice in 2020, you see so many things that have come up in 2021 as well. And at the national office, we, and as an association in general, are constantly figuring out ways that we can support student athlete voice. And in the Office of Inclusion, we have a student athlete activism webpage that not only helps, one, talks about the history of student athlete activism throughout the years, but then also talking about things for student athletes to keep in mind as they utilize their voice, not just from a racial justice standpoint, but in other causes that are important and are essential to them. And then we also have a resource to help coaches and administrators to support student athlete voice on their campus as well. So we try to take kind of a 360 approach to that, and working with our other colleagues within the membership, as well as the national office, who are advisors to our SAC leaders. So it's something that we take really seriously, because we're here to support student athletes. And that's not just support on the court or the field, that's support holistically, right? And different causes that are important to them. We have to make sure that we're fostering not only the resources, but cultures of belonging to help them to be able to utilize that platform, their platform.
Yeah. I love it. And you're getting a lot of, and Michelle, I'm going to bring you in. You're getting a lot of, you're a sought after speaker here. I look like through your LinkedIn, and it's like, I'm speaking here, I'm speaking there, I'm speaking here, I'm speaking there. I
got to find her on LinkedIn.
All right, Michelle, I'm going to hand it over to you. But first, okay, now go.
I'm here. So what I was thinking when you were talking about all of the opportunities that you have for students to learn and grow and be developed, was you have been very intentional in making sure that you think very clearly about the student athlete needs. And I have some experience with student athletes that I'll talk about later, but what has been, when it comes to social justice and activism in particular, with the students who are now in our colleges and our universities, what has been the most surprising to you that you've learned in operating this student athlete advisory committee and training them to advocate for themselves and advocate for others? What surprised you the most?
That's a great question. And I'm trying to quickly think about what surprised me the most.
I always tell Michelle she needs to tone it down and not ask questions that are better than mine. We're going to have to reconvene on that, Michelle.
I'm getting fired.
I think that one of the things that surprised me the most, there are a few things, but one, that there are some student athletes who are unsure of how to utilize their voice, right? And so helping and giving that confidence. And we think about student athletes in general, that they're confident, talented individuals, right? And understanding that they have some, some of them, not all of them, have some challenges with, like, what does it mean to utilize my voice? I want to utilize it in a way that helps causes, and I'm unsure how to do that because they may feel like they don't have enough information or because of their different backgrounds. And so really helping them with their confidence in that. And then the other piece that's not, surprising, but to see, I think pleasantly surprising, is to see how many student athletes who are utilizing their voice and their platform as well. And I think that sometimes we don't always get to see that in different ways. And of course, social media has definitely highlighted that in ways that probably haven't happened in years before.
Within that SAC, do you have officers and levels, and do they get to have leadership roles within that committee?
Yes. Yeah, so I don't oversee our national SAC. We have our great colleagues within each division. There's a national SAC, and on each college campus, there's a SAC group. And so within SAC, there are different leadership positions and different committees for students to be involved in. One thing that happened within past year plus, we've seen more national SAC have committees related to DEI and goals related to diversity, equity, inclusion. Not to say that they didn't exist before, but really, taking it to different levels and being consistent. So as we go into this, new year, those are still goals that SAC have related to diversity, equity, inclusion. And so that's really cool and good to see.
I think one of the things that we've seen on our college campuses, and certainly across the country, like you said, with social media, is that our students, Gen Z in particular, they are all about advocating for others. They are all about making sure that voices are heard, and they want to amplify the voices of all people. You mentioned that one of your areas is student athletes with disabilities. And we know a lot of folks with disabilities have invisible disabilities, things that are not seen to others. And the pandemic has been especially hard on people with disabilities because the support is not always there. Sometimes things can be misunderstood or misconstrued. And certainly student athletes who are coming in with all these identities, being maybe first gen, or being a student with a disability, being a superstar on social media, but maybe not so much in the classroom for various reasons. When it comes to student athletes with disabilities, what type of support are we looking at? What is that for coming at it from the student experience? What does that look like for them?
I think it can look like a variety of things depending on the different ability the disability that they have. So we think from a learning, if there's particular accommodations do they need. One of the other big things that we've talked about as an advisory group and just as a national office with one of our leading consultants in this area is the stigma around and related to, not just student athletes, but individuals who may have a disability. And so how do we provide more education and comfort around people talking about it and getting the help that they need? And we spend a lot of time, I think this is another form of disability from a mental health standpoint of thinking about how can we support student athletes and their mental health, particularly as it relates to COVID and racial injustice and being, this pandemic that we're kind of still in, right? So really thinking about understanding their needs, providing accommodations, providing resources. That guide that we're working on will be really helpful, not only for student athletes, but coaches and administrators to provide the supports that student athletes need who have a disability. And again, just the education around the various disabilities that exist and how we can provide a more inclusive culture from that lens. Because a lot of times when we talk about providing inclusive cultures and cultures of belonging, a lot of times we're not including disability in those conversations.
Right. And I think that the fact that you say that, you work to educate, I think that is the most important thing, because there are so many people who want to support, but they don't understand what the main issues are related to, student athletes or students with disabilities or students who are experiencing, oppression in the classroom or, in society. And it's just about educating. It's just about opening the door and having conversations. There's a lot of willingness, I think, that I've seen. And I'll turn it back over to Joe because I'll go on. And I'm sure he has a question.
Yeah, my questions aren't as good, but I'm going to try my best.
Actually, I'm doing this, Joe, because I have construction happening in my building. So if I do that, that's the reason I'm going to mute for a minute.
That's okay. No worries. So Ncaa, I want to ask about how, because mental health's important and diversity, equity, inclusion is obviously plays a big part in that. You talked about belonging, you used the word belonging a couple of times. And I'm always curious because we've had higher ed, we've interviewed like 100 and something higher ed presidents. And many of them, especially those that I think are doing that deep work of DEI, talk about belonging as almost this antecedent to diversity, equity, inclusion work. That you have to feel like you belong, or it's a part of the DEI work, and the belonging is as much, it's as important as the other things. How do you facilitate belonging when you're working inclusion at the Ncaa? Is it a focus itself? Because it's DEI and there's no belonging. It's almost assumed that belonging is a part of that, right? So how does that play a part in what you do?
It plays a huge part. That's a great question. And I think that as diversity, equity, inclusion work continues to morph and change, right? And people are using belonging more. I wonder if it's going to be like a DEIB, added to that. And at the national office and in the association in general, we help foster belonging, I think, through inclusion and being diverse, right? And so it's not only if a person feeling welcome, but do they feel supported? Do they see people who look like them in different roles within the organization or even on a committee, right? And if I see someone who looks like me, do I have people who think in the same way, or if they don't think in the same way, is how I think going to be valued in the same way as how other people think who are part of the organization or part of the committee. And so we do have efforts and continuously working toward that. There's not an endpoint, right, of saying, hey, we got it all figured out, right? We're continuing to grow and learn from each other and make the necessary adjustments to be as successful, not to just say that we're successful, but to be successful so that people not only want to work here, but they feel like they're making a difference here and they feel like who they are is accepted and is supported and is understood. And those are a lot of different layers, right? And right. So, but it is very important. We recently, meaning the Office of Inclusion, partner with our employee engagement groups, we call them our EEGs, and had some programming regarding perspectives, where we had individuals from a variety of backgrounds. We were very intentional of making sure, while we couldn't include all backgrounds, but thinking about things from multiple layers, right? And then asking people to share their thoughts and their experiences. And it was such a well-received program. And it was also an opportunity for us to stop and think about, we have so many talented individuals who come from various backgrounds. And a lot of times, we may not realize that, we may take that for granted. And we have to be mindful of that. And we have to support that in various ways. And so again, we're not perfect. I don't think we would ever say that we are, but we are moving forward and working hard to create that culture of belonging. And being able to provide resources to help the membership create those culture of belonging for the individual campuses and conference offices for those who support and work with student athletes and for our student athletes as well.
Well, it seems from all of the reports that have come out and the studies that have been done that more and more people are interested in short-term types of education and training, especially now with such huge job demand out there, than say, geez, I got to mostly leave the workforce for 2 or 4 years to get a degree. Particularly for our college, we've been very strong in the 2-year degree space, but we've not been as strong in the short-term workforce development space for individuals to be able to come and take a short-term, few weeks, few months workforce training course and go out and get a job or get a better job. We haven't done a lot of that. And I thought this was an opportunity for us to be able to get into that space very quickly and be able to provide more diversity of offerings using our partners in Unmuddle, who can provide some expertise that we don't have at a medium-sized college in the middle of New York.
Joe, are you hearing what I hear?
I'm not sure. I don't hear any construction, if that's what you're talking about.
No, not the construction in my office. Absolute passion in your voice for this work. I'm just watching you and seeing your face just light up over the types of initiatives that you're running and the connections that you're making.
And the difference she's making.
Absolutely. I'm just so inspired. And I love that you have a love for this work, because it is so meaningful. I have a student athlete who's like a bonus son to me, who was in my classroom at my community college. So we went through the NJCAA process with him and then into NCAA when he transferred to a university. And now he's playing pro ball in Slovakia. And so watching that process and seeing how confusing it can be, what the work that you're doing, it's so meaningful because it is that sense of belonging that you're trying to create for the students that helps them feel like they can navigate through the process, right? We all know those first phases are so important in any experience that we have. I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk about your work with coaches and what has been surprising in that work, because I can imagine, and I know, and Joe knows, that working with adults can be a totally different experience from working with our younger generations.
Yeah, well, one, thank you for just mentioning my passion. I really am. And sometimes I have to like reel myself back because
Never
Don't
reel
hold it
yourself.
back.
I get myself
Never.
really hype about it.
Never.
Not on this
Don't do
podcast. You
it.
let it flow. Go.
Gotta go. Good.
Be you always.
Yes, thank you. Because I am, it's like the DEI work is as a calling, it's bigger than me, and I'm really great to be a vessel to help and do this work. To answer your question with coaches, I have many opportunities to engage with our coaches, be it coaches that are a part of our committees or working with my colleagues in leadership development through some of their programming, or coaches emailing and saying, hey, Ncaa, we got this situation. Or, hey, again, I mentioned in the past, like 18 months or so, providing a lot of training opportunities for coaches and other athletic administrators. And, you know, it varies. I think in general, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, one, it's a shared responsibility, right? So the Office of Inclusion, yes, we lead these efforts and we love to do it, but it's everyone's responsibility because DEI touches all of us, regardless if we realize it or not. And so having conversations with coaches, you know, and they have things that are very important to them in their role as coach. And one of those things are our student athletes. And so really seeing them wanting to, hey, how do I help take this to the next level in terms of having conversations on racial justice? Or I had this situation happen with, you know, within a team, and how do I handle it in making sure that it's not only a learning opportunity, that we're helping to change culture. And so really hearing from coaches and them not only wanting to find resources and solutions for one thing, but really like, how do we help change culture, or how do we help continue to move forward in some areas? And that is a beautiful thing to me. I think that, you know, we all have a responsibility. And when coaches do that, because coaches connect to their, you know, their student athletes in ways that I will never be able to, right? Wow. And so by them wanting to foster belonging, foster inclusion, having conversations on racial and social justice within their team or within the larger athletic community, that's going to create an even stronger bond, probably, you know, with their student athletes, and for even future student athletes who may look to attend that institution and be a part of that team.
This is the part of the episode where we're going to ask our guest a question to keep her on her feet. Are you ready, Ncaa, for this question that Michelle has prepared for you today?
All right, Michelle, what you got for me?
Here we go. You can only win money with this answer. You can't lose any. Okay. Here we go. So Ncaa, there's a song playing on the speaker every time you walk into a room, every time you get on stage to talk or present. It's your entrance music. What song, Ncaa, would be playing for you?
Oh, wow, that's such a good song. I mean, good question. It would be anything with Beyonce, but I'm trying to like pin down like which Beyonce song. The first one came to mind is Brown Skin Girl, but there's so many Beyonce songs right now that I'm kind of blanking out. But
artist is good. Artist is good. I think if you can come up with an artist that fast, that's good representation. And we're gonna go hit the. I was gonna hit this, but it was correct. So you know, I don't have a correct button, but we're gonna go correct on that one. I like it, Ncaa. I like the passion, and Beyonce's obviously a very passionate and amazing singer with lots of energy. So that's good. I like that. The reason I asked that question is because it's always good to find out where, you know, music always is a reflection of us and what we care about, what we listen to, how we relax. You're doing very important work. It's not like you can just mess up like, oh yeah, I didn't do my diversity, equity, inclusion work well enough today. I mean, maybe that happens, but it's not like, oh yeah, somebody came to me and said, how do I increase my voice? And I told them, I don't have time for you right now. So you're always on your A game, right? It's like, I hope so, yeah. You cannot make, well, I'm going to say the pressure's on. It's not that you can't make mistakes, but it's everything you say, every message that you're giving, people can take them uncomfortably. They can infer things. And this is DEI, these conversations, they're hard conversations to have. I imagine they're hard for students, they're hard for adults, they're hard for me, they're hard for you. You know, I have these at my workplace and people say, well, how do you feel about this? And I go, it's hard to talk about this stuff. It is hard because you think about the layers of emotions that each person has, one deeper than the next, and you have no perspective of what that other person is going through on their personal front, but you have to seek the understanding. It takes time and effort and energy and focus and all of these things that have to be kind of perfect. They have to create the perfect environment, or at least one that's not too imperfect for the message to get passed along. And so
we're
go
reading
ahead.
a book. I want to extend what you're saying and add some force to it, because you're hitting the nail on the head with this, as you so often do.
Oh, I love you.
There's a quote in a book called Teaching Race by Stephen Brookfield. And the quote is, there are two ways to teach race: badly or not at all. And
What was the first way?
There are two ways to teach race: badly or not at all. And that's by Lucia Pawlowski. And so when I was thinking about your unconscious bias, training that you're going to be doing, and your 8-point plan to advance racial equity, I'm leading a book study over here on this book, and it is messy work. How do you stay inspired? Because the badly happens more often than the not at all. We are talking about race. And so we come away feeling uncomfortable. We come away feeling as though we have misstepped or we didn't do that well. How do you stay inspired to keep doing this challenging and difficult and messy, and there is no guide type of work?
And how do you stay grounded? Because it is hard.
Well, those are some great points. And I think there are points that a lot of times people don't even realize or think about when a person is engaging and leading this type of work. One, I'm not perfect. And so I do mess up. I try not to mess up, right? But I also think that's a human nature. And there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish I would have said this differently, or I didn't know this. But I use those examples to say that this is a journey. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to have the conversations. People are afraid to do the work because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to mess up, because the cost can be very costly, right?
That's it. The cost can be very, very hard to deal with if it's
And so you do have to be intentional. You do have to be strategic. You do have to learn. You do have to do your due diligence. And for me, what keeps me going back is that this work is bigger than me. I mentioned that for me, the work is a calling. And so there are times where I'm like, man, I wish we could have gotten from A to B really, quicker, or just in general, or, I really thought I really connected well with this group, and I didn't. And I go back and I reflect and I say, what could I learn? What I could do differently? Or somebody may say, that sucked, Ncaa. I mean, hopefully, not to my face, but particularly on campus. When I was on campus, I've had students to come and say, hey, I don't think that you did well on that, or you focused on this group more than this group, or I felt attacked. And so I have to check myself, and I have to take that feedback in and say, was there truth to any of that, Ncaa? Or was someone projecting because this is maybe the first time they've heard this conversation, or because you touched something that was really impactful to them in a way that they're still kind of processing. Mm-hmm. So I have my own kind of a process of thinking through things, and I just regroup, pause, reflect, take a step away,
little Beyonce,
and then I come back and listen to little Beyonce, dance it out. What would B do? Then I said, what would N and B do? And so we keep it moving, and so I stay grounded by, saying that we're all a part of this work. I have an amazing support system, not only in my partner, but friends who do this work, and mentors, and I can talk to them about it, but also people who don't do this work either. And they help keep me grounded. They help me remember that it's bigger than me. We have to keep moving forward. And I'm like, if I don't do my part, then how can I encourage someone else to take a step and do their part as well?
Love it. Michelle, you have any final questions for Ncaa before I give her the last couple?
I think I have a million things to say to you. I think you're amazing. I think the work that you're doing is so important. And I think that you probably inspired a lot of the EdUp Experience listeners today with your statement about having, this being a calling and having a passion for the work. I mean, we know that if we have a passion for the work, we never work a day in our lives, right? So thank you for being an example of that. Too, Boss is my favorite song by Beyonce.
Hey, I like that.
And I always sing that one at work, but I mumble it to myself throughout the day. And then finally,
If you ever want to change the air horn, just record yourself singing and I'll play that instead.
I'll do that, Jim. I'll go right on that. There's an angle that we haven't talked about, and I just wanted to get a little bit of insight there. And that is for everyone in the audience that is currently navigating through this NCAA pathway as a parent of a student who might be impacted by some of the work that you're doing. Well, they will be for sure. Do you have any words of encouragement for them? Because it is a daunting process to go, into the NCAA, and parents are very much a part of that, not, at the forefront, but they do feel the pressure and the weight that their children feel as they're navigating through this. What encouragement can you offer them based on the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the encouragement I would love to offer to parents or family members supporting student athletes is that the NCAA has people who work here who are very committed and willing to help in any way that we can. There are a lot of different components and layers, as you mentioned, not only to the process, but to the organization. And I've been at the national office for 2 years and 2 months now. And I am just amazed at how my colleagues continue to rise, above to be able to help support, because we're here, we're here for students, and part of students are their families we're supporting. And so if a parent reached out to me, which I'm not saying give me a whole bunch of reach outs on things, but it's so, I'm willing to find my colleagues and people who can help support. And that's not only within the national office, but that's on our college campuses as well. And in our conference office, we are dedicated, we're committed to helping and to doing our part. And we're not perfect in that process, but we try really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you just one quick question, focusing on the equity piece, and how involved, or what was the stance, or what's the current situation, whatever way you want to answer it, around the whole paying athletes,
yes,
from the NCAA, for their name and likeness and image. And there's a chunk of athletes who are going to begin earning money. And what is that? How is that? I don't know how to ask the question the right way, but how does the inclusionary environment look at this and students being paid? And is that something that you guys focus on at all, talking about?
That's a great question. I wonder if that's going to come up, because I'm not necessarily I'm like, oh, that don't come up. But no, it's fine. I'm not the best position to answer that in terms of a national association, because I have great colleagues who work directly in there. Just knowing that the inclusion and equity framework is being looked at, has been looked at. We know that student athletes are already, receiving funds in different ways off of their name, image, and likeness. And that has been a conversation in terms of the equity piece from the beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I think that's as much of an answer as I would expect too, because I think it's a big issue. It's a big conversation, and equity is a huge piece of it. So to know that your office and folks there were involved in it, I think it says a lot about how that process was rolled out. So I appreciate your response there. Okay, let's give you our final 2 questions. You ready? Here we go. Number 1, Ncaa, what did we miss about your role and what you do as Director of Inclusion at the NCAA? Anything that you wanted to say today that maybe we forgot to ask you? And number 2, what do you see as the future of higher education? And you can answer that with a DEI lens if you'd like.
Oh, great question. So in terms of what you missed, I think we covered a lot in terms of the work that I do at the national office. Not all of the components of the work, but really the highlights. I just want to further highlight that we're here to support student athletes. That's our main focus. And in supporting student athletes, we are also supporting those who teach, coach, and lead them. And that has a direct impact on our student athletes. And we do that in a variety of ways, be it programs or initiatives. One of our signature programs is the Inclusion Forum that happens each year. And we bring different practitioners and Student athletes, we used to bring them in person, but that hasn't happened yet due to COVID. But even last year we had a virtual, or still this year, right? Yeah, this year we had a virtual symposium for student athletes, coaches, and administrators, and higher education practitioners interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we take a lot of pride in the work that we do, just knowing that the national office, we're doing work internally as well as externally around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we recognize it's a shared experience. And we know that when we do our part and when we're learning and we're growing, that helps. And that helps not only us internally, but that helps us better support our membership. And so those are things that I would like to highlight. And your last question in terms of the future of higher ed from a DEI lens, I think that as diversity, equity, inclusion in general continues to morph into and transform, we're going to, as higher ed institutions and higher ed professionals, we're going to have to be ready and willing to do that in a quicker pace, because I think that sometimes we're a little bit slow to join the game.
Are you saying higher education is slow, Ncaa?
Well, it's sometimes, just in some areas.
I will
You
be
and
on
me
your
both.
side, Ncaa, absolutely. And I love that you say a quicker pace.
Yeah, and we have to do that, and to be able to support our students, to be able to support those who work on campus and our future students. And I think we're going to have to, we've seen because of COVID, have a different level of flexibility and understanding of meeting the various needs of our students as well. And so, but I think the future is bright if we're willing to if we're willing to rise to the occasion. And I think as a whole, we just got to roll up our sleeves and do some more work and boss it out, right? In words of Beyonce.
Love it. Well, at the beginning of the episode, Ncaa, you said you were looking for an entrance sound. So I picked one out for you because you've dropped bombs all episode. Here it is. She's dropping bombs, ladies and gentlemen. Ncaa Blair Hackworth, soon to be. Congratulations on your successful defense that will happen in the future. I'm just telling you congratulations now because I know it's going to happen.
Oh, look, I accept all of it. I appreciate it. Yes. I'll come back when I'm real.
We would love to have you back. And of course, my co-host today, ladies and gentlemen, as I move my soundboard to this sound, Michelle Cantu-Wilson. She'll be back, Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson. You see her again. And Ncaa Blair Hackworth, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to cut this episode up. I'm going to cut out the part that says, I will come back. And I'm going to put that on social media. So then if you don't come back, we can shame you for not coming back.
I'll be there. I'll be back.
I love it. All right, there you go, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
I am Dr. Lorenzo Reyes, Associate Vice President for Workforce Economic and Resource Development at San Juan College. As a founding partner, we value how Unmodel can enhance workforce development. Unmodel brings together community colleges and employer needs to create credentials that lead to jobs with good family-sustaining wages. The future of community colleges is about meeting learners where they are through short-term industry-recognized credentials. This can put them on the path to degrees and new careers, while directly filling real workforce needs of employers. At San Juan College, success matters is more than a tagline. It is at the heart of what we do. And our motto gives us one more opportunity for our students and our communities to succeed.